Hello, we are here today with Katie Edwards, the author of The Last Sun, which when we are recording this interview, we don't know yet when it will be released in Italy, but once you are going to see this interview, it will be already available in Italian. So, do you have anything you want to say to future Italian readers or old Italian readers?
I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I have every grandparent of mine came from a different part of the country, but my two overwhelming backgrounds or ethnicities are French and Italian. And my first two foreign deals for my book was French and Italian. So it's kind of special to me knowing that the first trilogy is out in France, and now to have a version coming in Italian. My grandmother's family would be very pleased if they knew.
Yes, because you told me that you have some
Oh,
relationship with, yeah.
yeah, with America, a lot of your background is it shows in the food that you celebrate holidays with. Italian food is well, American Italian food at the very least. My nana was she was the dominant force in deciding what we ate and how we got together, and she was very Italian, very very Italian.
And so we're going to start talking about this new book, at least in Italy, this new book. And let's talk starting from the broad picture, the fact that it's a very long project. The whole saga, the tarot sequence, will include 9 books and a lot of short stories and all ancillary project, which we are very excited to be able to read. And so you have this ambitious project with the 9 planned book. And personally, I would really, really love to pick in your notes database to answer all my questions. I have a shared Excel files with all our theories and
Wow, I love that.
and so, even though you are like playing the long game with this saga, you still have like 3 trilogies, and kind of all the books tell a unique story that can be appreciated by itself. They're not really standalone, but they focus on very different things. And so you are able to weave these 3 main themes, these 3 plot arcs. So the whole saga, the one related to the trilogy, and the one related to the single book. And these 3 different plots that are always present have very different vibes because, of course, the saga talks about like conspiracy, but also prophecy. The 3 different trilogies, I think you explained it in a post a couple of time ago that they have different like perspective on runes, which is the protagonist's lives, and while the single books are more very action-packed, very engaging books. And so, and the first trilogy, of course, build this found family, this family that the protagonists create or not. We're going to talk about it later around itself. So, how do you merge these different elements, and are you aiming like for different narrative goals with the different plots, and how do you balance also these different tones?
I think the first thing I would say is that how lucky I am to even get the chance to tell 9 books with the same character. In publishing today, you can't go up to a publishing house and say, "Hey, sign me. I want to do 9 books with the same characters, basically the same story arc from start to finish." That just doesn't happen. I mean, I really while the publisher I'm with right now, there's a lot of things that I'm working out with them. I will always give my editor thank you for taking a chance on me on something like this, to literally come with her for an idea for a 9 book series. But by the time the first book was published, I knew all 9 books, what they were going to be, what the story arcs were. It is very much the story of one person and his found family, and that was important to me. I wanted it to be the same core character. So narratively, this is Rune's story. Rune St. John, he's what's called Lord's son. My power centers on the island of New Atlantis are based around tarot cards. He represents the archetype of the sun. His estate fell when he was young, and he's now rehabilitating it and bringing it back into power again and forming allies. realizing what kind of a ruler he wants to be. But I always knew that the 3 books were loosely divided into trilogies, 3 trilogies. The first trilogy was very much about all of the secrets Rune was keeping from the reader. To a certain extent, he was an unreliable narrator because he was keeping something from the reader that got revealed by the end of the 3rd book. The second trilogy, however, is everything kept from him that he doesn't know about his own past. This is when his mystery becomes a little bit broader. It's no longer just a mission of his. His family is pursuing it. His allies are pursuing it. Everyone's realizing this does somehow involve the fate of the city. And then by the 3rd trilogy, it's all endgame. I love my endgames. I love building up to a really just powerful, adrenaline-fueled finale. And the last 3 books are gonna, in any series where you put so much time into characters, the 3rd trilogy or the final book in a series, it's where you're allowed to break your own rules. It's where you're allowed to be, because basically it's the end of the story that you plan, so you're allowed to take some chances. So readers know I've taken a lot of chances in my first 2 trilogies, so I want them to be a little scared of what that might mean, what chances I might take on the 3rd one. But the end, and then each individual book does tell a story too. You're right. It's really one of the ways that I was able to divide the storyline so distinctly, because it couldn't all be about an urban fantasy. It couldn't all be about Rune operating in the city that he lives in. It needed to have more plots around it with variety. So I always knew I would have what I call tentpole themes. Like this book is really my weather disaster story. This book is really about the monsters of my island that I live on the island of New Atlantis. This novel is going to be my, like, one of my, I can give you an example of one plot that changed that I couldn't do from the very beginning when I started plotting out this story. Book number 5 was supposed to be the pandemic storyline. It was supposed to be my contagion storyline. I planned this years and years before the pandemic happened. And then the pandemic happened. And then I'm like, there is no way I am writing a book where the whole book is about a pandemic.
Yes,
I
you
did
planned it a little bit too
a
well.
little bit, yeah. I just did not want to spend a whole book back there. So, and also people, but by the end of COVID, no one really wanted a book about a quarantine pandemic storyline. So I had to do on the fly. I did have to change that storyline, but the rest of them, they're really kind of grouped around. The book I'm working on right now is my road trip book. It's the one where I put all my characters in 2 RVs and I send them across America, and so it has a kind of like a different flavor every book. But that's the outline so far, and I've really stuck to it. I've got to say, one of the really fun things about knowing, I mean, right down to what my last scene, I know what every novel's about. I know the core outline of it. I know the big reveals, the big secrets. And to this point, there have been very few times that I've deterred from that. So the fun thing is, from the very beginning, from the first chapter of the first book, I was leaving some clues to how the last chapter ends, to a plot in book 7. Like I was able to lay what we call Easter eggs and breadcrumbs along the way, so that if I wanted to leave have a really big mystery be revealed in book 3, I can be building up to it in the first 2 books because I know it's going to happen. And this is the first time since I started doing that I'm starting to see the payoff, because 3 books are out and I've loosely revealed one big secret in a follow-up project that I call the Eidolon, which is essentially book 3.5. And to see like something that I put in front of my readers for 3 whole books that they might not have seen, but laid clues, so that they could go back later and not feel they were tricked, or not feel that I've like changed my story, but reveal something that had always been there right in front of them. That's the fun part. That's what I've been waiting for, and I'm starting to do that now.
Yes, the ending of the Eidolon was
It was meant to be a big. It was a. I'll never get to do that again, like to surprise people so thoroughly, because the more people who know about you, the harder it is to hide certain things. That was a treat as a writer. That was me being able to really, really shock our readers, to really, really say, hey, something you perceived is completely different. And it's been that way all 3 books. So we're going into the next book. There are some people who read that story, so they know an inside piece of information that the main character doesn't even know. And then there are some people who know that piece of information. So the next book I'm writing for 2 separate audiences altogether. But it all comes together. I followed a really, really tight outline.
Yes, let me say that you managed to surprise the reader,
But
both with the ending of book three, which I
yeah,
think was like a very emotional, like disclosure, while the ending of the Eidolon was, sorry, what?
it was the book three was all about revealing secrets. Book three was a very big book for revealing secrets, just like book four is going to be about healing and the next stage, what comes after, you know. And it's I'm looking forward to it. It took a long time for me to pause after book three to think of what the next whole because I wasn't just writing book four, I was plotting out books four, five, and six. And to a certain extent, the funny thing that I didn't expect is while plotting out books four, five, and six, I was filling in some of the major elements for books seven, eight, and nine. Like already, like because I'm working on the middle trilogy, the final trilogy is starting to come into clearer definition. So the last 2 years, I has been nothing but note taking. I mean, I've got piles of notes, like post-its, digital notes, audio notes, emails to myself when I'm traveling. Don't forget to take this note. It was nothing but note taking.
So the second question is about the world building. I'm not really a big world building reader. Like if it works, it works. It's not something that really drive me in, bring me to read a book. But while I was thinking about your book, how all the three books come together, this is an interesting element because the tarot sequence is set is an urban fantasy set in our world, as we said before, during our times as scene of quarantines taught us. But at the same time, is a world full of a lot of creatures, like for example the big bad guy of book one that any good nerd would recognize, and at the same time, of course, the tarot, the major arcana, which are part of are a fundamental piece of the whole puzzle, of course, of the book. So your take is unique, but at the same time recognizable because you play with all the pieces that humanity already brought to the table, and so you are adapting and combining world folklore and pop monster creatures culture, and so you are recombining, reconfiguring more than creating from scratch. And so what influenced you into taking this approach, and this approach that allow you to create a world which is both vibrant but at the same time familiar to the reader because they use all the pieces that the readers already know?
Looking back, using the tarot cards as a central theme was something I'd always planned. It wasn't a given that I was going to actually do that because there was always the chance that someone else somewhere would use that for their series while I was writing mine. And like someone could start a series on Atlantis and maybe at the last second I would need to pivot and use something else. So I had other pivots that I could use. I knew I wanted power bases and I wanted those individual power bases to have very rich world building, and I leaned on the tarot cards. But even all of my monsters and specifically my ghosts, my I don't know if I have a better word to use, any sort of like undead or specter or ghostly presence, I really relied on world mythology. And what I would do is I would use the word mythology, but I would always try to put my own um, world building stamp on it. I would try to do something that, you know, the bad guy in book one is a very common bad guy in magical role playing games, like a really common type of bad guy. But my interpretation of what it meant and his vanity and how it affected his face and the way he was trying to use magic to look less monstrous and more human, but to really horrifying results. Like I try to do my own creativity there to make it mine. But I love the fact that I can share like global world building. It's something I struggled with because I asked myself if I had the right to use global world building. I try to rely on ethnicities that my own personal branch comes from, but there are others that I don't have any background, for instance, from the Amazon, but I love Amazon mythology deeply, and that's worked its way into my story. So part of this is just it's sort of like when you're a kid and you would read all these stories like the Indiana Jones type stories and like exploring the world and finding things that, you know, are lost and mystical. I've always wanted to do something like that. So I took that as a starting point, the lost civilization starting point, and then just try to make it my own. But it's not even just mine at this point. One of the things I like doing with my books is I share it with my readers. It's very often that I'll put out there, hey, I need a monster in this chapter. Does anyone have an idea? Do you want to share a monster with me? And then if someone, recommends something, like, I mentioned in my acknowledgments that someone made the recommendation, so I give them credit to the idea, but then I put my own world building spin on it. It's kind of fun, like, to let really involved readers pick little things like that, that it doesn't change the story, but it makes them feel involved in it. So
Yes, and in particular, you recently released on Patreon the Saber story. So
Mhm.
the shifter, which are like prehistoric animals. So that's also an interesting take.
I
Also,
actually
with the take on with the Fae,
yeah.
we still need to see a lot more. I expect about the Fae in the following book, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the Fae, absolutely. The whole concept of Fae, that's one of my core characters is named Max, and Max has always been driving the plot of my stories, yet he's never in the books themselves, really. He always, because he's young, he's kind of shifted to the side while the adults take care of everything, even though what they're doing is to save him. Like, it's happened for 2 novels now, and in the next book, he finally gets his own. Like, he really comes into the story and he grows, and that's like, I don't even feel like these are characters. I feel like a book dad. Like, my book kids are growing up and taking on their own like development arcs. And Max, in particular, his Fey background, what type of Fey he is huge. And not only that, but the story you had mentioned, Saber, wasn't necessarily in this world. It was a story I put on my Patreon site, but the weird creatures and shape-shifting creatures, that's coming too. That's Lord Devil's Court. I'm really excited about that. There's a lot of things I've kept out of the series up until now because I've been saving it for the second trilogy, like some of what I call the arcana, the leading lords and ladies of the island, and the which are also the major arcana on tarot cards. Like, I haven't really introduced the devil or the moon yet they are two pivotal characters for books on 5 and 6 in particular. So I really saved a lot of things that I can't believe I'm finally here, like, ready to write them. Like, I'm actually on book 4 of the series, and I'm able to start writing some of this stuff.
Spectacular. And let's talk about one of the other main element of the book, which is, of course, the queer component. I love queer literature, and one of my favorite element of queer literature, in particular modern queer literature, is the theme of found family, which is, of course, one, if not the driving force of your books. And we'll talk about specific character in a moment. In particular, I love Max. I have the biggest soft spot for Max. And I want to know the classical questions. How did the cast come together in your mind? For example, Max in the book gets literally dropped on Rune and Brand doorstep, but I think that it was like there was more planning involved in your mind, or it was dropped also for you.
I think that I'm going to be honest. When I started this series, it was much darker. You can tell the first book, The Last Son, is dark. It's a dark book. There are some really Rune has a very tough past. He was abused. He was tortured. That those things come back at him in flashbacks. And the first book is really a lot of my own darkness went into this series. And I did bring Max into the series, and he was supposed to lighten it up. The real big thing that happened in book 1 was when I introduced a character called Quinn, which is roughly the same age as Max. For some reason, Quinn became like the beating heart of the series. Like, he became like, just no two ways about it. Just the young, good guy whose love for everyone around him, everyone kind of hovers around him. And when I did that, I realized how much happier I was as a writer, how much more my readers were responding to, accepting the darkness in my story is one thing, but giving like a light at the center of it, like to have a family sitting around the campfire and night might be around you, but they're together and they're safe and they're looking out for each other. There was something special about that, and my readers really liked it. And more so, I liked it. I liked what it did to me. I liked what it meant. And I started seeing this not just about a story of Rune persevering against those who would destroy him, but him doing it with his family. I mean, that is his strength. His strength isn't that. By the time I got to the end of book 2, I got criticized by a couple of people because I won't go too much into the details, but Rune's not necessarily the absolute hero. Like, he might not be the one like doing the final blow. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's part of the whole point of having allies around you and other people who have your back and they watch out for you. like I really enjoyed that dynamic, that he doesn't always need to be the hero. He doesn't always need to be the chosen one. He's surrounded by people, some who are just as powerful as he is, but while he's the unifying force, he can let others have their moment on the stage too. And that's how I think my story get a little bit richer and a lot more possibilities for character arcs and where I take them. And I never look back. Once I realized found family was the heart of my story, never look back. And you are right, when it comes to LGBT plus writing, found family is a huge element of it. And I mean, when I first started this out, you know, God, what was it now? About 7 years, 8 years ago, the world was a different place than it is now. We've gone from being a world where you might have needed a book like mine because it had core gay and lesbian themes without it being about gay and lesbian themes. It was just a big part of the story, to being mainstream. And now in America, at least, to being almost, you know, a bit of a rebellion again. And I don't know, it definitely, with what's going on in the country and the world, my country and the world, it's given me more of a motivation to get my series done, to get these books out. I want to share more stories like this, not less.
So the silver lightning to the situation is the tarot sequence done.
It's not ending. This is the work of my lifetime. I don't want to do any, like, there's no other sandbox I want to play in. This is my sandbox. This is the world I've created. And I'm going to be more than busy just telling Rune's story, but I've also got a ton of other ideas in this world that I've created. I want to do a magical boarding school series. That's a huge, like, that's like to my heart. That's something I just want to do. And I've got a bunch of kids in my books, and they go to a school called Magnus Academy, and I put the 2 and 2 together and realized I've got to write that series too. So there's a lot of things I want to do, but this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah, let's say that it's also a really good sandbox to play with. It's full of character, of possibility, of opportunities, absolutely. And so by continuing about talking about the characters, so I don't want to say the name because it's a little bit spoilery, but the inner circle,
Yep.
the extended inner circle around Rune is full of characters that have different backgrounds, life paths, are at different stages in their lives, and they have very long lives. And but at the same times, they all share a sense of not quite fitting in the places, in their society, in the places the world expect them to be. And however, they find support in this group within each other. And a lot of the book's themes are explored through these dynamics. And how do you manage the cast interactions? And are you like striving for a balance within this inner circle? Because even though, of course, Rune, Adam, Brand are the main characters, at the same time, so all the other characters still have their spotlights, they have the opportunity, they are very unique, they have strong voices and so on.
Character voice is very important to me. That's the number one thing that I think makes, you know, you can have great ideas and you can have great writings, you can have a great plot, but if readers don't care about the characters, that really injures the story. They might love the book, but they're not going to want to go back to it again and again. And they're certainly not going to be looking ahead to the next book in the series. When you have a series, you come back to it because you love the characters. And I don't think people would love the characters if I don't love the characters. And the thing is, I do love the characters. They feel like my book kids. Some of these characters I've had in my head for over 30 years. You know, what I call archetype characters. Rune is an archetype character I've always wanted to create. He's echoed in every novel I've started and stopped since I was like 15 years old. Same with Brand, same with Max, same with a lot of the other characters you meet. One way or another, they've been in my head. They feel like, so it feels a little bit like a found family. All of these different powerful characters who've been running through my brain my entire life are finally in a story together. That's one thing, like just my entire life of wanting to do it. But the other thing is I take notes constantly. I have exercises where if I'm in line at the bank, if I'm waiting for a movie to start in a theater, if I'm at the deli counter at a grocery store, I imagine my characters there. I constantly, it's almost like I hear their voices in my brain when something weird's happening. If you're in the 12 items or less line and someone comes in with 14 items, I'll hear Brand speaking in the back of my head. I won't say it out loud, but you know, and I write that stuff down. So I get to the point where what the average book is about 100,000 words long. I've got, at this point, I keep on saying I've got well over 400,000 words. I've been saying that for years now. I've got well over 500,000 words in a huge file, which is nothing but notes on the series. That's basically 5 books of material with nothing but one-liners, scenes they might be in. I mean, 10% of everything I have are one-liners from a character called Brand. He's the character who gets off with the most outrageous lines. And I've been writing just like lines, like, you've got to find Brand in a situation where someone cuts him off on a highway. And then I have a perfect thing he would say. And I sit on that line for years until the moment comes up that I can actually use it. So it's a pretty cool safety net to have that much material. And it just the nature of constantly thinking about those characters and what they would say, it makes them feel real in my head too. It does. So that's one thing I've never struggled with the dialogue. They've just always been so clear. The other day I was hunting down the first word I ever brainstormed about the series. I think it was back in 2001. I mean, it was a long time ago. But yeah, I keep that stuff. It's kind of fun to see how it's developed. I mean, some ideas do change from beginning to end. They have to. Like when I abandoned my Contagion storyline because I felt like I didn't want to write a novel about another pandemic. But I keep all that stuff anyway. It's kind of fun because one of my characters can not only see the future, but that character can see different probabilities. He can remember futures that never happened. So he's the way that I sometimes share deleted storylines.
So we talk about him for all the interviews, so let's talk about our main guy, our main character, Rune. And we met him as an adult, approaching 40, I think 37, 36.
Yeah, they're about.
Book. But his situation in the first book is far from stable, of course. Mm-hmm. And over the course of the first book and the first trilogy as a whole, he undergoes a significant growth. And in particular, not only in his situation, but also in his relationship with Bram, Adam, Max, and the Tower, and all the other characters, in relation to his connection with his past, which is one of the main, of course, element of the book, but also with this place, like how he feels about a society, and which is his place in a society in which he has very deeply conflicting relationship. And so what inspired you in creating Rune, and how would you describe his journey within the tarot sequence, both with himself, which I think is one big element for Rune, but also in his relationship with others?
2 different things about Rune. One is how he interacts with other people and his empathy. Let's call it his empathy, which is actually rather meager in book 1. Like, he doesn't have as much empathy for people around him. He's short-tempered. He might be, quote, mid to late 30s as in human years, but in Atlantean, even in Atlantean, he's still viewed somewhat as being, he lives like a confirmed bachelor with his Brand. He basically, they're not good with other people. They don't have good social skills. They don't have people around them. It's really just them as a nuclear, like, two people bonded together and looking out for each other. And then his whole outlook changes as more people comes into his life. And through that, I was able to experiment with his empathy growing. And to be perfectly honest, I grew up in a time of the world where diversity was really important, but it was a new thing that we were talking about it. And we, back in the 80s and 90s, we were just talking about changing language so that it was more accessible. Like, why say policeman if you can say police officer? Why say fireman if you can say firefighter? Really sensible small things. But I didn't realize, while that felt good, the rest of the world changed much quicker than I did. And when I wrote my first book, people would share with me, I love your story, but ... but you're kind of hard on women in some spots, or but you don't really have any strong woman in your story, or but everyone's really white. I know that you were trying to be diverse by having a lot of gay people, but it's a lot of white gay men. And I really paid attention to that. I read every review. I still do, actually. I read every review people write on Goodreads, Amazon, and I saw what they were saying. I saw the people who said, I love this novel, but ... And I paid attention to it. And the next thing I know, I began to grow as a person. Like, I go back and I read the book and I'll put my finger on something. Like, on the first page of the first book, I say it's a 40-man orchestra. Why would I say a 40-man orchestra? Why Why 40 man? Like, why? I'm suddenly asking myself the choices I made and the words I use, and I feel so much better about myself that I became a better person and I made my writing more accessible to other people. And I was able to reflect that in Rune's journey. There is actually parts in the next book where when Max came on the storyline, he was thrust upon them. Like all of a sudden they're taking care of a 17-year-old, but they were really hard on Max in the beginning. They came to love him very quickly, but they were really hard on him. And to a certain extent, there were things going on there that even Rune doesn't know about. You don't know about Max's past entirely yet. So why everything fell apart so quickly in those first moments, you still have a lot to learn. But the fact is, they did not treat him well. A 17-year-old who basically just lost everything and had no one. And in the next book, there's a point where Rune looks back and thinks, we did a crappy job. I know we succeeded, but we could have done that so much better for you and made it so much more welcoming. And I love the fact that they're looking back and they're thinking that way. It feels like growth for me as a writer too. That's one part of growth, and that's my growth. The one thing I haven't let go of, and this is present from the very beginning, the first chapter of the first book, Rune hates people in power. He doesn't think that the world is a fair place, and he blames the people in power. That is something where he might be quiet about it. He might accrue a huge power base on his own, but I'd never forget that that is the #1 defining characteristic of Rune. And what he does with that from the beginning, the reason I wanted to do a huge series, like 9 books, because I didn't want to just create a world. I wanted to change a world. I wanted to create a world that I could change. I wanted to, after 9 novels, this world will be irrevocably different because of the characters I put in it and what they do and how they learn what's wrong and what they can do to save it. And it's almost like things that I can't do in my own world, I wish I could. I wish I could be king and change everything. I can't. But in this novel, I can talk about what I think is more fair and better. So
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see that this transformation and also like how Rune intend to use his position is one of the elements I'm more curious about going on.
the next book really, there's one character who's come into his life. Her name is Diana. And Diana she's older and she's savvier and she sees right through Rune. And it's really fun seeing her point at Rune and say, I know what you're trying to do. And even Brand doesn't know about it. And she's able to startle the storyline in a couple of points by pointing out the obvious. And it's really a fun new character. Every novel, it seems like the found family does grow. But at this point, I try to do it very slowly. But everyone I add, I just adore because they add a whole new element to the storyline. Just in the next book, too, I would say 2 new massively main characters, like 1 core character and 1 arcana called Lord Wheel, who I mentioned, the Wheel of Fortune. And these are really like key characters. So, and they're bringing so much into the story. It's like you get to learn whole new things about these characters you love, or that I love. So
Yes, we are waiting for Tavis.
Tavis is another one of those characters who I've mentioned him before because the prophet Quinn knows in some futures there's someone called Tavis and everyone loves Tavis. And he's been trying to figure out which future are we on? Where is Tavis? Why hasn't Tavis come in our life? And Tavis was an archetype I've had as long as I've had Rune as an archetype in my head. I've thought about Tavis as a character for decades. So to bring him into this story, it's like everything lined up. And I'm really excited about it. Really, I take it very seriously, the idea of adding new characters, because you never want to upset what you've done, but you also want to grow what you've done. And sometimes these new characters, they're like the final element to really make the growth happen. So it's really a good moment to bring them in, especially at the beginning of a new trilogy.
And so let's close this interview talking about the fact that Last Sun is coming out in Italy, and given that we're Italian, we need to make everything about ourselves. Since the arcana come from very different geographical backgrounds, do any of them originate around here? And so are they one of the good ones or the weird one we should not trust?
I think that I know Rome is massively important. Like old Rome, ancient Rome is massively important. That was a huge development point in the history of my characters and their society. And also Lady Moon, her court is heavily patterned on Rome. So that's the whole, that part of that world, the ancient civilization I've been doing research on. As for whether there is an arcana with roots there, I'm sure there is. I just need to figure out who it is. I've been trying to be really diverse in how I separate across the world. And I realized the one part of the world I really haven't paid attention to is like, Greece, Italy, like that area. I really want to spend some more time there. And that's my background too. So I definitely, I would expect something. Absolutely.
We will see. We will wait for it. So, thank you so much for your availability, your kindness for this interview. And if there is anything else you want to say to Italian readers, please feel free.
I can't wait to meet you. That's what I have to. One of the weird things about publishing in a foreign language is like every time I go into Goodreads, I have to hit the translate button immediately because I get all these people speaking in French to me, and I love translating it and reading what they have to say. It has been a joy, like the publication experience in France. I can't wait to see if I have something like that in Italy too. I can't wait to see if the first book does well and the other books come out. But I've got other stories to tell, so hopefully this is only a start.
Okay, so thank you so much, and see you in the next video for the people at home.